I'm Jonasz Rewiński and you're watching TVP World Talks, where every word matters. Now, today is the 12th of September and Poland is celebrating its Land Forces Day. Not only is it an opportunity for the army to conduct a process of obtaining new recruits, of advertising for jobs within the military, but also it forms part of Poland's bigger effort. This is an effort intended at deterrence. Poland wants to rebuild its armed forces following substantial donations of equipment to Ukraine, but also to create a framework for deterrence such that any enemy looking at Poland would say, well, perhaps it doesn't make sense to attack this country because they have a powerful military. Along the line, however, there have been some discussions as to the individual contracts. Will they be implemented in due course? Will there be delays? And there were reports that some of them might be downscaled, perhaps due to the fact that the budget is stretched thin, despite its record size. So we're going to discuss this and more with our guest today. Joshua Burgin from the Warsaw Security Forum is joining us now here on TVP World. Hello and welcome.
Janusz, good morning. Thanks for having me with you.
So let's get straight to these reports. According to the media, there are delays in the implementation of the HIMARS agreement. In fact, the negotiation is still ongoing. There is a framework agreement, but no specific contracts. This could cause equipment to be delayed and possibly fewer launches would reach Poland in a general sense. Should we feel worried about these reports?
You know, with large contracts such as these, outcomes like this are not unusual. There's always a back and forth. There's often technical delays, and budget questions always persist. I personally wouldn't worry too much at the moment, but it would be concerning if we're 3 to 6 months down the road and these sorts of rumors or delays continue.
Do you think that it is a justified reason to believe that perhaps the efforts of the government to make sure that the Polish industry is involved in a sufficient capacity, that this could be why the negotiations are actually this protracted?
It's certainly possible. To that end, I think Poland has earned the right to be part of the manufacturing process. Obviously, there may be some elements that can't be done in Poland, but the notion that the Polish government and or its industry would seek to be a part of the manufacturing process, putting the delivery much closer to the point of manufacturing, or at least the final part of manufacturing, makes sense to me. But it also could be a point of delay for sure. I mean, obviously there's facility needs, there may be terms and financial terms that they're part of that. A whole range of things could be part of that delay process.
How many of these launches do you think Poland needs? We're talking about high mobility rocket artillery, effectively. The HIMARS has been tried and tested in Ukraine. Poland is also taking deliveries of a system that is similar in size and scope, the Chunmoo, manufactured in South Korea. So what do you think of the numbers? How many of these should Poland actually get in order to ensure optimum deterrence?
Well, at nearly 500 HIMARS, I mean, remember, Ukraine has been operating on something like just beyond single digits. The notion of 15, 20, 25 units at total, the idea that Poland would have literally hundreds, 500 of these, that is a strong signal. This is what you might call deterrence. Does the final number end up being that big? That certainly remains to be seen, and I don't necessarily think it has to in order to project the sort of deterrence that the country would like. Nevertheless, I mean, again, in these sorts of contracts, there's always the starting point, there's the goal, and then there's the outcome. Poland is strong economically in no small part due to the fact that it is bristling like a bit of a porcupine. It is signaling to its neighbors, we are not to be messed with, and that's creating a safe environment for the rest of the economy to grow. So I, for one, have always thought that number, while ambitious, was incredibly aspirational and sends very strong signals.
But is it possible to actually, when you have a framework agreement, right, when you order an initial batch of, say, 126, that was actually the figure given by the media recently, is it still possible in the normal course of relations to say, oh, we've actually taken delivery of that or we've paid for that, but we will actually want like 100 more? So does a framework agreement allow you to basically dial up your needs and your deliveries as time goes by?
I can't see why that would not be part of any normative sort of business transaction. Bear in mind, I mean, the entire world right now is about as insecure as we've seen it in the past 70 years. There are tension points everywhere. For many, it looks like we're on the precipice of a whole era of conflict. The idea that there may be other customers and other needs around the world that may be also competing for these numbers in terms of manufacturing, we should keep that in mind. But I don't think it's out of line for Poland to be seeking to increase orders or increase deliveries as time goes on.
So what you're saying is there is a risk that if we wait for too long, we might actually have to wait longer because there is another customer who says, okay, so if they are not taking these launches, we're going to buy them off the shelf. And so this might actually add another year or two of delay. It's just a hypothetical situation there, right?
Again, I'm certain that Poland would not be the only customer for these HIMARS products.
And they are certainly quite successful. They are seen in Ukraine as one of the weapons which have turned the tide of the war when they arrived. Highly efficient, great degree of precision. So now, looking at this situation from a broader perspective, do you think the concept of the previous government to have two major sources of equipment, the United States and South Korea. And often you actually have equipment that overlaps, at least partially, like main battle tanks, like the aforementioned multiple launch rocket systems. Was this a good decision from the point of view of contracts, logistics, maintenance, and so on?
Well, I'm certainly some would argue from the standpoint of efficiency that having multiple lines of product is inefficient. But from it having redundancy, I think it's a master stroke. We have for a long time now in the Western world, the US sort of at the forefront, been focused on the notion of just-in-time deliveries. Well, in a world where conflict is the norm, as opposed to the prevailing peace we've had for 70 plus years, mass, the actual resource, trumps the conceptual theory of something that works ideally. Efficiency is an idealist perspective. It's not something that may work in an actual combat or conflict situation. The notion that Poland has multiple points of outlet, multiple points at which it's sourcing materials from which it can generate its own defense, I think this is probably quite smart. If I were in the policymaking position, I would want to have multiple points of delivery for similar tools or similar instruments of defense and security.
What were the main advantages of the South Korean contracts at the time, apart from the fact that this is a powerful economy that has experience in manufacturing high-tech weapon systems?
I think, frankly, it was because the United States was not capable of meeting all that were needs at the time. In candor, but even without if the U.S. was able to deliver everything on time, it still makes sense for redundancy, and South Korea was able to offer that.
So it's about availability. It's also about South Korea also being a frontline state. So they acutely understand the needs that countries of NATO's eastern flank might actually have at this stage, being as they were in a state of constant tension with Kim Jong-un's regime and the regimes that came before it, North Korea. So now, having said that, how much of a threat are we facing today? We are hearing news time and time again of Poland having to make efforts to reduce, for example, the artificial migration pressure on the Belarusian border. What does it tell us about our position geopolitically right here and right now?
Well, Poland is a critically important state in Central and Eastern Europe. It is the strongest economy. It is strongest for landmass, one of the largest for population. And I think it's sort of relative to Central and Eastern Europe, one of the indispensable countries. Poland, Romania, Eastern flank countries that have experienced communism, have spent the last 30 years wiping it away, resent and actually are pushed back against the notion of authoritarian governments. As we see the world right now, we are breaking into an era where you have a couple or five or so authoritarian governments that are attempting to redefine the world order for the next 70 to 100 years, to redefine the normative rules, how the system functions. And Poland is absolutely aligned with freedom-loving countries that are all sort of reacting and responding to this. But I don't think that it's enough to simply wring hands. Poland is not just talking the talk, it's actually taking forward steps that are it's not just hand-wringing, it's not just speaking aloud, but it's taking action to demonstrate its commitment to freedom, its commitment to security, its commitment to pushing back against authoritarian communist or post-communist regimes that are acting in a manner that is inconsistent with human rights, inconsistent with normative rules, et cetera, et cetera. So I applaud Poland for this. I think it's taking the right course.
What do you think should be done in addition to that? Poland, of course, is investing a lot in its military. What other initiatives would be useful in order to ensure lasting peace and security in the region?
Military is the first piece. The ability to understand intelligence is a secondary piece. Certainly, strong political environments. I mean, we've watched Poland experience a transition of power in the last, basically about a year ago. Sure, there were moments that were not fun. It was messy at times on the internal sense, but in the broad brushstroke, Poland is a normal country that knows how to have peaceful transitions of power, that understands the importance of security, that understands its role within its neighborhood and the wider world. And I have nothing but respect. There's a lot to be said for the political transition that it demonstrated. Poland is a net exporter of security.
And very
This
quickly,
is a result of not only its purchases,
yes.
but also the political stability it offers.
And finally, very quickly, do you believe that Poland has a role to play in bolstering the greater Western resolve in the face of political pressure, hybrid warfare being exerted against our Western allies by Russia, such as in the form of, for example, disinformation campaigns?
Absolutely think so. I think there's been much hand-wringing in Brussels and Washington for a long while without a lot of action, and Poland has consistently demonstrated its ability to act. It has offered clarion calls where others have sort of said, don't worry, it's not as bad as you think. And in fact, it has been as bad as we think. And Poland has been right there sounding off and putting out clarion call signals, and I think will continue to do so. And on top of that, has relevant experience to share with its Western allies and partners.
So it is not just about spending the right amount of money, but also maintaining the right level of resilience as a society in the course of one's efforts to counter these threats. Joshua Burgin was our guest today here on TVP World. Thank you very much for joining us and for sharing your insight.
It was a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And I'm Jonasz Rewiński. You're watching TVP World. Please do stay with us for more latest news and updates.